8. We've got no apologies today, and we've got a full contingent committee, and we also welcome Councillor Hamill, Councillor Gates, or Deputy Mayor Gates, and Councillor Ryan Balden Lumsden. If item 3 is a confirmation of minutes, if I could have someone confirm the minutes from the previous meeting, that would be thank you, Councillor Caldwell, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favour? That's carried. Conflict of interest declarations. None received. Going through. Am I there?
Start items.
No,
you've got
yeah. They've done it all different. Yeah.
There they go.
All right, so for item 5, our committee forward planning schedule is starred, reports and presentations 6.1 is starred, 6.2 is starred, and 7.1 is starred. Would anyone like to unstar any of those items? 6.2. So unstar 6.2 for Councillor Gates.
There's a project here that came in at $48,000 that I agreed to fund because there had been an expectation that we were going to deliver bus shelters, and I begrudgingly copied the director that I would allocate the funding given I had no choice, and miraculously he's come back with it reduced by some $16,000. Which makes a big difference when we're talking about the escalation of costs, etc. So thank you to the director for doing that for me.
Yeah. I'd still like to move all to the start item.
Okay. So all the start items. So all start items are moved by Councillor Owen Jones, seconded by Councillor Caldwell. All those in favour? That is carried. General business.
So I'm going to have to do the second part on the fly. Sandy, would you like me to email you the first part? Yeah, just give me a sec. Here we go. I'd like to move it. Yeah, let's. That's good. That's what it is. Sandy, bear with me. Subject GBI.
Potsy, are you listening?
First point. Is this a Potsy yarn though?
Yeah, this is Potsy.
Is it? Is it a Potsy yarn? Here we go. So this is the first part, Sandy, if you can chuck that up. Then we'll workshop the second part.
Wordsmith.
Robocop lays track.
Robocop lays trap, did you say?
So
It's the Coomera connector that's in there.
yeah, the Coomera connector, the feds seem to have walked back from.
Well, that's in the big book.
Yeah,
No, but they haven't. So I think
they
you'll
just
find-
haven't released the funding.
Big book.
Same thing,
So if we
it's
could
not
pause this
small.
for a moment, I don't think that they will release the funding until this current state government gets around to getting the federal approvals required
For the
in
koala.
order to proceed with the project that they'd like the funding for. So I would say to you that it probably is the prudent management of money not to advance $2 billion or however much it is to a state government that hasn't yet got its approvals in place or completed its design work for the same things.
It's actually from the ministerial media release, taken from Mark Bailey, and I hate to quote Mark Bailey because he doesn't support public transport marshals or fair zone reform.
But he does support public transport on the Gold Coast, and he understands the Gold Coast needs public transport.
Well, I'd prefer for him to understand that we'd need it delivered this century, but
With connecting buses?
here we go.
East-west connections, perhaps?
Yes, that'd be gold too. So the Queensland Cabinet and Ministerial Directory includes a section for media statements, and on the 4th of April 2022, so not too long ago, the first paragraph of his statement says, independent market research has revealed 63% of residents surveyed support the proposed Gold Coast Light Rail Stage 4 down the Gold Coast Highway. I'll carry on. The research was one part of an extensive community consultation program on the Burleigh Heads to Tugun section of the fourth stage of the light rail on the Gold Coast. 1,005 residents and businesses were surveyed, and he says here it was terrific to see almost 2/3 of the surveyed supported the transformative project. Here we go. The first stage of the consultation for the Burleigh to Tugun section saw an unprecedented level of engagement with 43 face-to-face community sessions over a 10-week period. That equates to more than 220 hours listening to the community's feedback and concerns and answering questions. Mr. Bailey said research conducted on the Gold Coast Highway Burleigh Heads to Tugun multimodal corridor study in 2020 showed that the community supported a potential light rail extension from Burleigh Heads all the way to Coolangatta via the Gold Coast Airport, and it goes on. And we'll talk to the merits of today's announcement in the press, but to answer Councillor Young's question, I've lifted those words from the first paragraph of the Minister's statement, which I can only assume and take at face value, is correct and reflects the results of that independent research. And I think we had a paper to council anyway. And?
Paul, but I had a feeling that he had something like 8,000 people that were consulted over two consultation periods.
So what I think we can do here, councillors, if we can come up with some words to add a second part, basically restating that we support the work done to date and reaffirm our commitment to delivering the fourth stage down the Gold Coast Highway in accordance with the majority view. That council reaffirms, sorry Sandy, so that council reaffirms its commitment to the Gold Coast Highway route in accordance with the majority community view
Has an alternative been
only
mooted?
Only the one going past the Burleigh Brewery and down the Service Road, not the M1.
and taking it down the heavy rail corridor.
Right.
Yeah.
Obviously by someone who doesn't know.
So I'm not sure if it's enough putting it on the public record here or whether we go write letters, but I think this will do its job.
Oh.
So how do we feel about that?
Well, it's not only community views that drive us, surely. It's our assessment of the options and our belief that this is the right outcome.
But it is a
Director,
Yeah.
have you got some views on how we can strengthen our position here?
It's also in accordance with the council's established position, and that established position has been arrived at, as you say, through prior community consultation and significant work to look at what the best route is. So we know that the coastal route is the most efficient route. It takes people to destinations, so it's attractors and generators for demand. It's a shorter route. It's a cheaper route. So you think it's shorter, cheaper, and has more patronage.
Yep.
It makes sense.
So that council reaffirms its commitment to the Gold Coast Highway route in accordance with the in accordance with the majority community view, and the adopted transport strategy, which I think is what our transport strategy is at now, 2041, or just say adopted transport strategy, on the basis. Sorry, Sandy, to have confused you there. So, in the adopted transport strategy, so can delete 2041, on the basis it is, I don't want to say cheaper, but the most efficient and cost effective. Yeah. Yeah, we're just workshopping this, so let's get it right.
Yeah, I do have an issue with the word efficient because, of course, you want these things to be efficient, but the concern or the issues that are being raised are not about efficiency. They're about other matters. So I just don't know whether that word's necessary in there. I also think if we're going to refer to independent market research, that we should give the source of that.
So I think we've had a report to council that's set out that research.
Hang on. So my understanding is there's a couple of different researchers. One was the state government, which was independent market research. There was ours that we did, which was thorough consultation, but it wasn't an independent, proper research methodology. So if we can just refer to the state government independent market research, I think that would be better.
So Council notes the statement of the Minister for Transport.
Yeah, so his statement's true. So, Peter, I think you're right. I think the inverted commas remain exactly as they are because you've lifted them from the statement. So the council notes the Queensland Minister for whatever he is statement.
So, Sandy, if we could go to the start then. So that council notes the statement made by the Minister for Transport and Main Roads. That, and if we could just add that council notes the statement. Sorry, the council notes the statement. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Councillors, you may, in terms of the second one, if we take out the words on the basis that it is considered, because that basis has already been established before you in previous presentations, you might want to add, it's not just the adopted transport strategy, it's also the preliminary business case work which has been undertaken.
And were the feds party to that business case, or was that a council statement?
Through you, Madam Chair, Councillor. So the step one, what's called a strategic assessment, was submitted to Infrastructure Australia several months ago. It was produced in partnership between the city and the state government, and that also reaffirmed the position that the strategic assessment phase is essentially is there a need for a project or is there no need? It establishes the need, but it also does a little bit of optioneering in that phase, which then gets taken through to a much more granular level of assessment in the preliminary business case phase, which is what we're doing now.
So, through you, Madam Chair, to Matt, I'm just interested to just touch on, and I know we don't have we've got to move in a second, I suppose, but I just want to get some clarity around the submission to Infrastructure Australia. Is that presently under assessment, or has Infrastructure Australia passed judgment? Because I think if we have a minister making a very prejudicial comment about a project that's under active consideration by Infrastructure Australia, that heightens my desire for us to go on the record here. I just don't know if she's perhaps acting on an outcome of an assessment that we're not yet across. Okay.
Four, I think we're talking about, yeah. Madam Chair, if I can, I'd like to make sure I give the council, the committee, make a very quick phone call to establish the exact status of it, if you don't mind, councillors, and
I think that'd be great.
My understanding is Infrastructure Australia is designed to, as Matt suggested, to actually work out if there is real demand, to actually take the politics out of these decisions, so we actually make decisions that are good, sound decisions, as opposed to ones that are supported or opposed on a whim.
Through you to Councillor Vorster, I just feel like the wording would sound better if it was in accordance with the adopted transport strategy, preliminary business case and the majority community view. Yeah. It's just, it should be, you start with the adopted transport strategy, if you don't mind.
I'm about outcomes. The words I'm happy to leave to others. So let's...
You're happy to leave words.
And because I'm generous, I won't call for the scrapping of the Burleigh tram tax at the same time. I'm just champing at the bit, champing at the track, chomping, champing. All right, righto, champ. Yeah, let's all have some buy-in. So let's say in keeping with. And it also will put it on 2 lines, which would be much better to look at. No. So all happy with those words before we get a confirmation here? Madam Chair, how are you feeling? I can put that in the spiel. How do we go, Matt?
Sorry about that, Councillor. So through the chair, so the information was submitted by the city to the state around June, July last year. It was then submitted, goes through a state government Infrastructure Investment Committee style forum, and then is submitted to IA soon thereafter. The IA don't actually need to approve the strategic assessment, is my understanding, but they consider it, and then the eventually on the process, which is the bit I'm about to find out now, is if it does get listed on an infrastructure priority list, or it's noted in the fact that there is further work being done through a business case style process for further review and evaluation as that process evolves and matures. So we did a presentation. I gave a presentation to them along with TMR, and I'm going to say May, June last year, probably about a year ago, and that was a very positive meeting. And there was I've got to say that at the time there was a lot of positive sentiment about the project from those representatives from IA.
I saw a list of important infrastructure projects that some levels of government, whether it's all 3 or 2 or 1, were lauding as critical to the delivery of the Brisbane 2032 Olympic Games. I think on that list I saw the light rail connection to the airport. Am I labouring under a false assumption here?
Through you, Madam Chair, my recollection is certainly the current stage 3 is on that list.
Okay.
I am aware that the Minister has certainly made a representation in the media that his belief is that stage 4 is required for the 2032 Games.
Yep, brilliant.
By recollection, he has also made those statements in the media regarding the Coomera Connector.
And the Robina Connector?
We know that the East West Plus Rapid Transit is already there.
Yeah, so good. Youpee. So good. All right, well, I'm happy with those words, and as I said, Madam Chair, happy to move it if I've got a second to the... Oh, good. Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Look, I think it's undeniable that our population is growing. And as much as we would like to build wider roads and more roads, the reality is that in the parts of our city that are already developed, we are constrained. The only way that we're going to protect our lifestyle and allow people to commute easily to work, to school, to the shops, to employment, to services, is if we can, as far as possible, encourage mode shift. Now, active transport has a role to play, but the reality is that some services are concentrated in these principal activity centres that require more than just a bicycle or a scooter. They require vehicular travel or alternatively mass transit. Now, the city very early on in, I think, 2013, adopted a landmark transport strategy that made it very clear that we wanted to deliver a light rail system that worked for the whole of the Gold Coast. And so many successive decisions of this council has been predicated on supporting the vision in that transport strategy, including, I have to say, our approach to City Plan, which recognises that we want people living and working on public transport so that they get to enjoy the best of the Gold Coast effectively on their doorstep, and importantly, at the lowest possible marginal cost to ratepayers. Because when we fell greenfield sites and we put people west of the M1, we actually make it more difficult for them to enjoy the Gold Coast lifestyle. We make it more difficult for them to enjoy access to services, including education and employment. Now, what's critically important, I think, as a council, is we're doing absolutely everything we can to secure our fair share of funding from both the federal government and the state government. Why is that? Well, because as Councillor Owen Jones says, we are only able, as a local government sector, to collect about 3% of revenue, taxation revenue, in this Commonwealth. If we want the big infrastructure projects that we need to protect our lifestyle, the money must come from other levels of government. It must come from the state, it must come from the feds. So we need to be in a position where we are negotiating as ferociously and as firmly as possible to get our fair share, and that can only be achieved if we are making bids that are in accordance with community expectation and community sentiment. And I think while there is an organised political minority that does not support the proposed Gold Coast route, as policymakers, we have seen the research which clearly demonstrates a majority appetite for this particular route, because it's the one that's been promised effectively since 2013. It's the shortest, it's the fastest, it's the most efficient, and guess what? It will do the most heavy lifting in getting cars off the road, because it passes by front doors and takes people to the front pick-up and drop-off area of schools, of work, of shopping centres. Legitimately, there is no better route that can substitute the use of a private motor vehicle than this one. And I have to say, I like the 777 service. I like the buses that connect the Gold Coast Airport to Broadbeach. I like them, but they're a stopgap solution. And quite frankly, I think it's a bit of an embarrassment for a city that's just supported Project Lift at the Gold Coast Airport to make that airport of world-class standard, to ask punters to leave the airport terminal to get on a bus, to change with a tram, to get to their hotel in Surfers Paradise. That lets us down as a tourism city, absolutely lets us down. We need an integrated transport network, but we need to make it simple and reliable, and we need to make it effective, and only this route will get us there. Finally, one of the most exciting parts about this project is the ability for the light rail to get into the Coolangatta CBD and across the border into the Tweed. I'm unsatisfied that any other proposition that's been put forward on the table can achieve that outcome. And I think any resident on the southern end of the Gold Coast would be bitterly disappointed to learn that that connection into northern New South Wales may be put at risk because of investment uncertainty. Madam Chair, our population's growing. We need every cent, every dollar we can get, and mixed messaging only undermines the case that every Gold Coaster depends on, and that is for us to get a return, to protect our lifestyle and make sure that we're all working in the best interest, not only of our own patch, but the whole of the Gold Coast. It's about time that we get a commitment, and hopefully this injects a bit of certainty into the debate. Thank you.
Do you want to take anybody who wants to speak against it?
Who's chairing this?
And that's not a surprise to me, because everybody in the room appreciates the need for us to actually get on with investing in infrastructure. It's the thing we hear from all of our residents about: where is the infrastructure? And we can only deliver it in the case of the light rail with the support of the state government, who spearheads the project, like Councillor Vorster has spearheaded this recommendation today. And the federal government needs to provide funding. They've provided funding for the first 3 stages, and the whole idea of saying, actually writing to each other to say, let's not fund stage 4, is just incredible. You know, so we're the 6th largest city in Australia, and I think that it is beholden on our 5, not our 3, but our 5 federal members to get behind the city and help us move people properly in an efficient way. And that's how we improve productivity, and it's how we make a more affordable options for everyday Australians. So new Prime Ministers come to the Gold Coast inevitably to announce stages of light rail funding. We've had it with Prime Minister Morrison, we had it with Prime Minister Turnbull, and it would be nice if we had an announcement in regards to stage 4 funding from the current Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That is a missed opportunity to be delivering meaningful public transport across our city. So we have to do more of it, and we need to build it as efficiently and as quickly as we can. And the reason that it's so important is because it is inherently a good environmental outcome to get people out of cars and onto public transport, and it is inherently going to protect our coastal way of life to make sure that we have capacity in our transport network to allow for a growing population. So for those who might be critical of a transport network that services the majority of the urban population, we actually can't afford the economic or environmental cost of continued sprawling development in an uncontrolled fashion to the west. We as a city value the green fringe that we have, and we want to keep it that way. So we know that development needs to be consolidated into a smaller footprint, and in order to do that, we need that to be offset by making sure people can move around efficiently. And light rail is the way that we as a city and as a council have been endorsing the future of people getting around the city for decades. This probably started 20 years ago and was in a strong feature in our adopted transport strategy in 2012, and continues to be the feature of how we want to try and provide meaningful public transport in our city into the future. So rather than the scaremongering, we actually need to be showing people that this is the way of the future, that it's actually enhancing our lifestyle and protecting the coastal way of life by making sure that we are delivering meaningful infrastructure to the population. And any criticisms of the most efficient and effective route delivering public transport to the vast majority of residents is completely out of line and ill-conceived in every respect. So that's why I'm speaking in support of this motion. It's only 2 lines long, but it's a strong message that we need to send that as a city, this is the way of the future and this is what we support.
Thank you. Just briefly, I think that the city made a commitment to mass transit systems about 2 decades ago, and in around about 2008, 2009, the city engaged with the community very genuinely and legitimately, and we had the Bold Futures planning process, which ran for a couple of years, and we derived from that what the community wanted the city to be like in the future, so that it wasn't just a haphazard outcome, the result of development that's unchecked and population growth and so forth. So we determined with the community what the aspiration was, what we wanted the city to look and feel like and be like to live in the future. And then we kind of drew back from that and said, well, what are the key decisions that we need to make to help us achieve that outcome? And the very first key decision was to make a commitment to light rail. And that was all about providing opportunity for people to move around efficiently, to reduce congestion, to ensure that our air quality and our quality of life entirely is at a very high level, so that in the future, whatever that date may be, 2040, 2050, we can look at the city and think this is a beautiful place to live, it's clean, it has organised and efficient transport, public transport. There's less congestion that there might be in other places. So these were the goals that we were seeking to achieve and meet, and light rail was a very key element of that. Since then, we've had numerous iterations of what the routes might be, and also of the heavy rail, and I've concluded without doubt that the route down the highway is the most effective and most efficient, and it's going to deliver the best outcomes rather than any other circuitous route along the back road or along the motorway alignment. Those are just nonsense. This is the only way to go, and it is very disappointing that we don't have that commitment from the local federal member of Parliament. I think it's, I've seen what she's written, and it's, and I'm aghast at that really, and it's become a very political thing, and that's unhealthy. I think the city has determined a goal for the future. We've determined a key element in achieving that goal, and I suggest all of those parliamentarians at every level get on board and help us achieve that.
Yeah. Thank you. And look, I just want to support everyone that's made comment today. It's really important, being the centre of the Gold Coast that I do represent, is high density. We're only going to get more people in this particular area. We currently in Surfers Paradise and Broadbeach can get to universities, we can get to hospitals, and we need to get people to the airport. This is where our visitors land. This is where our residents go when they want to go interstate, overseas, and we need to ensure that we've got connectability to these particular areas. And Southern Gold Coast needs to be connected with the rest of the light rail to ensure that our city continues to grow, and support from all levels of government is needed now. As Councillor Caldwell said recently, we're 4 years that we could have had a connectability through to the airport and to Southern Gold Coast, and it's time that we actually push forward and get this delivered, because every year that goes past we're going to have more visitors and we're going to have more residents to our area, and we need to ensure that this infrastructure is put in place.
And just to add to that, I think with all levels of government, we actually need to look at what's happened over the last couple of years, where every business, every industry here on the Gold Coast has been affected in either a small or a large way by tourists not being able to favour our city as much as they could, international tourists not being there, and we hear from Destination Gold Coast all the time now, where they're marketing not just us to our to Queensland, but to nationally, to internationally. And if we're to be known as an international destination, then we have to ensure that people are able to move around our city and to experience everything that our city's got to offer. And as we're all very well aware of with the figures, 80% of people that visit our city stay less than a kilometre from a beach. So when we talk about the route going straight down, north-south, down the highway, through to the airport and on, hopefully forwards into New South Wales, we are delivering what the strategy has informed us on. We're delivering what the residents have informed us on, and we are establishing a network that will not only support the residents of this city to move around with less congestion, but it will also support the visitors who come to our city, where they don't need to hire a car or they don't need to rely on alternatives, that they will be able to be delivered to the front door of wherever they choose to stay, whether it be in Burleigh, Surfers Paradise, Broadbeach, Southport, and going up further up. They will be able to deliver themselves to our universities of choice. We have people, students coming from overseas choosing to study here. We have 30-odd thousand international students registered within our city who need to have the ability to move around our city without having to purchase a car or to rely on other alternatives. So as when it comes to a mass mode shift, this is actually going to deliver what the city most needs, and that's people off the roads onto public transport that is reliable. Every 7 minutes they can walk to a station. If they see a tram departing, they know they've got a 5-minute wait in a well protected environment to be able to access the next stage of their journey. So I think this puts a message out there to the federal members that this is the way that the city is looking to go forward. So I appreciate everybody's input here today, and I appreciate Councillor Vorster raising this on the floor here this afternoon as a general business item.
Chair, would you mind if I just briefly close?
Go.
Madam Chair, I think what's often lost in the debate concerning the light rail is the fact that those with a light rail station close to their homes have the ability to access services that are available elsewhere in the city. It's not so much about who can now come visit Palm Beach, for example, for the first time or more easily, but it's about residents in Palm Beach being able to get to the Gold Coast University Hospital without paying $1,000 for parking. It's about students being able to get to Griffith University without spending 45 minutes listening to a bad podcast, battling traffic up the congested M1 before getting onto Smith Street. When you have access to mass public transport, you have services literally on your doorstep. And as a city, that is something we must encourage because it's not financially feasible for any level of government to be providing all of these services at a small scale in every neighbourhood. If we want to be prudent spenders of public money, we need to consolidate where it makes sense, but we also need to address accessibility, and that's where mass transit comes to. Madam Chair, I think if I were a student attending one of the schools along this coastal corridor, I would be bitterly disappointed by this announcement. If I were the Palm Beach Surf Club, who only has limited parking around its premises, I would be bitterly disappointed by this announcement. If I was a small business in Coolangatta, which had the most torrid time during the pandemic, I would be devastated that fewer people would potentially walk through my door. If I was a worker at the Twin Towns facility or whatever it's called, Services Club in Tweed Heads, but lived in Queensland, I would be devastated, right? And if I was the Currumbin Wildlife Sanctuary, I would be devastated because I tell you what, my business, my social endeavour depends on people actually getting through my front door. And if they've got to take 3 connecting buses to get there, I'd be devastated by that. So, Madam Chair, I should say, I think when we talk about light rail, we shouldn't just be talking about the heavy lifting it will do to ease traffic congestion. I actually think we need to be talking about the way it will transform the lives of Gold Coasters, giving them access to education, giving them access to employment, and giving them the ability to support small businesses right across the spine of our city. It's not just a transport argument, it's a social argument, it's an economic argument, and tell you what, we shouldn't be arguing about it to begin with because it makes too much bloody good sense. So hopefully we send a strong message today. And one thing I'll say about this council is that there is nobody in this city, and I say body, I mean group of people, that better represent the collective interests of the city. We have no agenda other than to represent our communities and look after the future prosperity of the city. And if this earns the near unanimous support of the council, which I hope it does, it should send the strongest possible signal to those who write the cheques that this proposed route is the majority view. It's the one that will look after the taxpayer, and it's the one that will look after the Gold Coaster too.